Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to be back with you talking about all things A Date with Darkness and narcissism and traumatic relationships. And not that that's a good thing to talk about, but I enjoy being here with you and providing education. I have a very special guest planned for today's episode. It's an interview that's been, some time in the making, and I'm hopeful that you will enjoy the interview. So definitely want to chat with you and get some administrative stuff out of the way. Of course, as you know, the group coaching and individual coaching sessions will be coming available. The link is down in the show notes below. So if you're interested in getting on that wait list and finding out more information about that, please sign up below. As always, if you have questions, comments, or concerns about the show, please email adateWithDarkness@gmail.com, and I would be glad to take a look at those. And my assistant and I, we kind of go through those and see what's what there. And of course, if you're interested in free support, I do have the Facebook group, A Date with Darkness Facebook group. So you can head on over there if you want support from folks who are also in the healing stages and recovering from relationship trauma. And you want support and you want to provide support for others. The Facebook group is the way to go. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to support this podcast by sharing the podcast, liking, or leaving a positive review on iTunes. That helps others find the show so that they can listen to it as well. So as always, thank you so much for checking in. And how are you this week? How is everything going with you? And I hope that all of you, despite all the stuff that's going on out there in the world, that you're staying safe, you're taking care of your mental health, you and your families are well taken care of. So I hope that that you're doing positive despite everything that's going on out there, from inflations to the mass shootings that has gone on. My heart goes out to everybody that's suffering from that, and those things are recent, as well as we're still in the midst of a pandemic. So hopefully all of you are doing your best to stay safe from that as well. So without further ado, my next guest is author Dr. Sherrie Campbell. Dr. Campbell has written some very useful books for those of you that have trouble with toxic or dysfunctional or abusive or even narcissistic family members. And she shares her personal experience and how she dealt with it and what motivated her to then write about how to do it and how to not only just deal with the emotional trauma, but to sever the ties completely. She talks about, also what she went through as a byproduct of severing those ties. And so I think she has a lot of useful information, and I really enjoyed this interview with Dr. Campbell. So without further ado, here's my interview with Dr. Campbell. Hello and welcome to the show, Dr. Sherry. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me, Natalie.
I am so excited to do this show with you. So for people who are not familiar with you, who you are, what you do, and the passion behind your work, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm a private practice psychologist and author and podcaster now and a social media influencer and probably the only expert really worldwide giving people direct guidance through a toxic family, through understanding what kind of contact you should or should not have, which does include no contact.
Mm,
And I'm one of the only experts willing up to, if not the only, to push back against the cult and culture around the idea of family and the idea that family cannot be abusive. And even if they are, it doesn't matter because they are family. Um, I want my book Survivor approved more than I would ever want it expert approved because the big experts don't touch this. They want to sell their books. They want to be safe and they might dance around this because I kept researching in my own pain coming from an extremely toxic family and the research always fell short. It helped me understand many things, but it didn't ever give me permission to fully and wholly take care of myself. So I started to blaze my own trail.
mm. Can you talk a little bit about the book and your motivation or inspiration behind that? Because that is one of the main reasons I reached out to you, because I love your book and I find it so useful.
Yeah, so I've got two. I've got But It's Your Family, Cutting
Yeah.
Ties with Toxic Family and Loving Yourself in the Aftermath. And I titled it that because anytime I tried to find support, I would get, but it's your family, but it's your mom, but it's your dad, but you only have one sibling. And I just wasn't making any headway. It was like there was a ceiling over my desire to heal and find acceptance. So not only did I get the toxicity from the family system, but I got a big time cultural kickback on me uh, that I couldn't quite grasp. It just felt surreal. I mean, people abuse other people. People can be abusers. So we understand that groups of people can be abusers. But if we give that group of abusers the title family, all of a sudden there's a different narrative that seems not penetratable. And it seemed strange to me that you couldn't penetrate that because if families are made up of groups of people and people can be abusers and groups can abuse people, then how is family immune? So the next book, the new one, which is I'm getting more emails on this book than I even know how to handle. I actually feel some anxiety to try and get to it, but it's adult survivors of toxic family members. And I have it here. So this, I was really cute at the end of, but it's your family. I'm like, oh, I did it. I cut ties. And I thought that, things would sort of end there. And in fact, my post-separation abuse and secondary abuse and the cultural kickback for the past 6 years has been a journey I didn't know I would take. So this book details that journey and also helps you write yourself back into existence because I go through Erickson's theories of psychosocial development and I give the reader the pen to their own story. And we walk through all of those stages together, undoing a false narrative and repairing the reality narrative so that you can live a new narrative today that's yours.
I like that. And I don't have that book, so I'll have to be sure to pick that one up. Can you tell us a little bit about that and expand on the false narrative a little bit? Because I'm curious, in your experience, what is the biggest false narrative that people have about themselves as they're going through this process?
That there is no hope, that they cannot trust, that they are not good, that they cannot separate and individuate, that they are not allowed to define their own identity or life narrative when it comes to identity development. Then they leave sort of that era and get into heading out into the world as somewhat of an adult, 18 to 40, right? And you don't know who you are through that time because you weren't ever allowed to develop. And many toxic families are sort of cult-like. You're not really allowed to leave. And further,
Mm.
you don't get to define your own role in the family system. It's a conquer and divide. And I detail a lot of this in my new podcast as well. And that's called Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. And I, again, on that one, I can't seem to get not enough me to get to all of the messages. We are defined by the power holders, and it really isn't about love as much as it's about obey. And this idea of a strange kind of loyalty that only should extend from child to parent. Not that there are not toxic adult children, because there certainly are. I think the parents are involved in creating that. And then I believe I was raised by 2 toxic adult children.
Wow. So let's go back for a second, because there are people that could be listening to you that could be thinking, my family may be toxic, or maybe they're not toxic and maybe it's just me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. So can you give us a little bit more clarity on some of what we might be looking for in a toxic family? How do you know that it's your family that's toxic?
By how you feel the large majority of the time. So a really easy way to differentiate this is toxic people are bad people with good moments. Healthy people are good people with bad moments. So emotional abuse is impossible to prove. I cannot prove an eye roll. I cannot prove a tone of voice. I cannot prove a sarcastic joke down when it's gutting me. I cannot prove the gaslighting, the projection, being put in inappropriate roles to parent my own parent. They can gloss over all of that and make it their own narrative. And as a child, you want to make up a story, or you just make up a story about your power holders so you can remain attached. What it took me, having my own kid, and it took me until she was about 10 to consistently and persistently see and know that this was not right. And also, I never wanted to be around my family. I didn't enjoy being at home. The room that I created in my room, my actual room where I was sent to deal with my emotions, I don't know what magical thing that was supposed to be in there that I was supposed to find, but I found lots of transitional objects between stuffed animals and records like Annie and A Hard Knock Life and things that helped me go through in a fantasy way. But if you feel worse after better, the large majority of the time, and you experience a tremendous amount of anxiety to even be around your core group, they are toxic.
You talk a little bit about being a scapegoat. Can you dive into what it looks like to be a scapegoat in some of the treatment that a scapegoat experiences in the family?
So you are in clinical terms, the identified patient. You're the one. I was the scapegoat. I was given the role to act out all the family trauma. So it was, wow, our family would be so good. We just have this rotten lemon here, and without her. And they tell this terrible story, and people begin to have compassion for your abusers. Like, man, I don't know how you deal with her. And the story is then contagious, and it builds, and it takes very little to start a false narrative and spin it through a population of people. Now, I believe I was chosen as the scapegoat because I'm sort of a spirit who sees the truth in the now. I'm an INFJ on the Myers-Briggs. I don't really know how to not be in the truth. I'd almost give anything to be a water off a duck's back. It's not real fun being an INFJ. And I couldn't not externalize the truth I was seeing. So it risked what I didn't know then, that I was exposing them. I was trying to help me, even trying to help them. I didn't have that mindset, I'm going to go expose. I thought I was bad, But I kept thinking, well, I can't be bad. So I would try to explain why I felt the way I felt because of how I was treated. And I was told not to talk back. What I learned in Don't Talk Back, metaphorically and in reality, is this needed to be a unilateral conversation where my feelings or my desire to stand up for myself and use my voice was considered abuse. I was the abuser if I did that. So I was scapegoated. Anything bad that happened in the family is somehow landed on me. Anytime there was a problem, I was called on to fix it. So if it got fixed or not, it got landed on me. I was labeled unwell, mentally unstable. And I was those things because I was provoked into being those things. I didn't just become those things all on my own.
Yeah.
My therapist would only focus on my reaction to the abuse, not the abuse itself, because parents don't abuse their children, apparently.
When you think back on it now, how far back in your age could you trace the abusive experiences that were happening to you?
This is going to sound strange, but when you read my book, although the first stages of life are pre-verbal and precognitive, they are not pre-feeling. By my behaviors growing up, how much fear I had, no hope in people, trust versus mistrust, I know that I've always experienced it. Also, I never got the feeling that I was loved, that a happy face would appear in front of me if I came into a room. There were loving moments, I suppose. I don't believe abuse works without intermittent doses of kindness. There would be no reinforcement. It would be far too clear. I remember those moments and I try to hold those, but I don't hold on to those because I'm not sure that they were actually real or just part of the game. And they were so few as compared to the abuse that it certainly does not motivate me to stay. And I became super afraid of people in general. So that fear coming from no hope is I left that first stage of life in fear, not in hope. I left the second stage of life shamed, not autonomous. So going through that was something that I take the reader through in the new book. And I keep getting all these messages because I do believe that we can unload toxic shame, not heal it. I'm not into these experts that have this plan and this 10 video course and heal your CPTSD. If you're giving lobotomies, sure, you can heal CPTSD if you get rid of the amygdala and hippocampal areas. I don't want to trick anybody. This is a hard journey. It's worthy, but it's very challenging. You don't heal it, you're healing it.
Okay. And I like that perspective that it's an ongoing process. Speaking of it being an ongoing process and how it is a journey, and you talked about becoming a parent yourself. Was there something that you identified in yourself when you started your own family that was reminiscent of your family of origins, toxic patterns?
The way I loved her, the way I love her, I was never loved like that. It's really that simple. Love is such a simple, effortless, authentic, organic to our core emotion if it is there. I did not get any of what I was seeing that I was capable of giving. And I identified myself as the problem. So I jumped into therapy, which is probably the worst nightmare for my family members, that another family suggested I go into therapy. And, my family members like to look good. And yeah, let's go fix the problem. Well, what I discovered in therapy, because I had a phenomenal therapist when I was young, I starved myself for 2 years. I was starved of love. So I starved myself. As I was becoming a woman, my mother became jealous. I think I never really started that journey, maybe because I thought I was fat, but I needed something anything to have control over if I was good or bad. I'm totally emetophobic, so I could never throw up. I can hardly throw up now. But the willpower to starve yourself, I honestly believe it's in some ways, and I'm not suggesting this is a healing technique, so let me be clear, but it saved my life as it was killing me. Because if I ate good food, I became a good girl. And if I became super thin, then I would get out from under the scope of my mother's jealousy. She started to see me as this when it came to attractiveness.
I see. So you, in her eyes, you were viewed as competition.
Correct. And treated as competition on vacations and other spaces.
Mm. What did you had siblings. What did you notice in sibling interactions?
That we were pulled apart, in my opinion. He was the golden child. I do believe that both my mother and father hate women.
Mm.
I have a little more compassion, so to speak, for my father because he grew up under an alcoholic who was such an alcoholic, he drowned in his vomit. He was
Wow.
domestically incredibly violent, and my dad had moved out by the age of 12. My dad got involved in cults and some other interesting things where I feel he was very inappropriate with me, with my brother, confusing me. And I detail some of that in the new book.
Yeah.
But I feel like he sort of came from, and maybe he chose not to recover. Maybe he was searching, so he kept finding these strange cults, some of these things projected onto myself and my sibling. But my sibling and I are both sort of world-class athletes as far as talent and other things. His ability to focus and be more insensitive to pressure and emotions was much more resilient than myself. At least that's what I thought as a child. I don't believe that today. Where maybe my eating disorder for those 2 years got me focused, I think sports got him focused. Also was a good narcissistic feed for my family. He ended up in a professional sport for about 5 years. But we were divided. There was really only allowed to be one star in the family. And that was verbally, that exact sentence was made clear to me. And we have no connection, and I believe he's very toxic. He will never escape. I think the golden child has a more interesting trap later in life. I believe that the scapegoat has it super hard in. If the scapegoat can escape, I think there's incredible hope.
Yep.
If the scapegoat stays, I think it leads to addiction, and I think it leads to other qualities of never finding the authentic self. But the golden child, I don't believe escapes really. And I don't think they question. And then they really carry on that generational trauma, believing what they're doing is deniable, and they do it all. And that is what I see from a great distance in my sibling.
I would agree with you about the golden child, is that they never escape. They never really see the light. Part of it is entitlement.
Yes.
And being groomed very early on that there's no wrong, that they're always right, and that they're special. And so, they lead on to that. But it's also very interesting to see, how the relationship with the golden child and the parents transition to later on in life.
It is. I mean, I do a whole show on my podcast around the conquer and divide. And why it's useful, why the power holders choose this, is that it breaks down the resiliency of each family member, and then it builds fear, and it creates confusion, and it starts just defining roles, and nobody is allowed. If this child does art, this one's not allowed to. All these limits are sort of placed. No, that's her thing, that's his thing. And why are there rations? I'm not sure, except that it keeps the power holders in power. It's a mob mentality, and the golden child is very often used as the greatest flying monkey.
Well said there. I'm curious, for people that are listening to you and what you're saying really resonates with them. Can you talk a little bit about how you knew it was time to leave and what that process looked like for you?
Yeah, and I highly recommend getting adult survivors of toxic
Mhm.
family members, because what I want people to understand is that I reached a space that wasn't a decision. Enough was just enough. I actually felt resolve, and they cut me off. So my job as the gopher of the family was to mend the fence. They break it, I mend it. They break it, I mend it. Um, it was over for me. And I
Mm.
thought, I don't have any more tools to mend that fence. It doesn't serve me. It sets me up for further abuse. I don't relate to the concept or the word of forgiveness because it's a painful word for me. It created more abuse, but I do change the semantics and I look at it as acceptance. I do accept them for exactly who they are.
Sure.
It allows me to have a love for them, but knowing that I don't like or respect them, nor do I need or want them in my life. It's no contact is not a hateful process. It's just a self-protective preservation process, which is
Mhm.
so misunderstood. And I put cutting ties on my covers. I know it limits books I sell. I sell the most unsafe book to keep you safe. So I couldn't be safe with any vein of poison coming my way because they had burrowed so deeply into my psyche from birth on.
Mhm.
I don't have the skill set to out manipulate someone because I'm not sick enough to do that. So I do the brave thing. I can't say in all humility that I think I've ever done the brave thing bravely.
And I think that's the piece there because there are a lot of people that struggle with that. They struggle with, you know, the pressure that, okay, this is, but it's your family, or you only get one mom, you only get one dad, or, you know, as you're getting older, your parents are getting older. And so it's
Yes,
kind of, that sort of you forgive and, you just accept them for who they are and then you act accordingly.
yes.
Why not that as opposed to severing the ties completely? Because there's a lot of people that are on the fence, very ambivalent, and want to, for lack of a better word, keep the peace or do
Yes.
what they've been conditioned to do.
So I think everybody knows their own limits, and that's what I encourage them to find. If you can have a vein of attachment and that vein isn't going to poison you, as long as you don't suck too much from the straw and you can have cordial contact or low contact, then I think you should. I really believe that cutting ties should be your last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, again, will say for any survivor that's come to me, which is many of them, none of them want no contact as a decision. Almost always you are cut off.
Mm.
Almost always you are cut off because you're never right. You're not allowed to be right. And they use this game of, I'm going to ostracize you to put you into such deep abandonment and make you feel so insecure that you will now need me as your power holder. What they're naive about is there is a limit to that. That limit happened to me. I didn't decide it. It was just over for me. I had this feeling that there was nothing left. And it
Mm.
was somewhat liberating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I explain in the new book that I kind of sat at the door of no contact with my ear to it for like 2 years because a lot of very evil things were done to me, evil, sadistic. And this is how they want to get you back in. But because I had some proximity, I could actually, for the first time, see it from like the fifth floor instead of face pressed up against a mirror,
Mm.
trying to find myself because it had some space. I could see the evil and not go, but is that really evil? Was that evil to send a broken, shattered gift to my house of a mother swinging around a daughter? I mean, I was able to see it. And then after a while, I was like, wow, there's a whole life out here I haven't even explored because I'm still so afraid of what they're going to do next. I was manipulated with wills and trusts. My father's death was withheld from me by instruction. I mean, it is amazing the sadistic things that have been done to me to get me to come back. They use evil and fear to try to get you to come back. No love, no resolve, no communication, no, it's pride. It's all pride, and pride halts progress. And I don't service my pride or the pride of others.
One of the things that I'm curious about as you've gone completely no contact, can you talk a little bit about any sort of inner repercussions that you may have struggled with as a result of going no contact? Because a lot of people think that once you've made the decision, it's very finite, it's easy, you've come to peace with it. But
yeah, I did that after, but it's your family. I was like, yeah, no, it did not work. Well, secondary abuse is defined in the book. So many people, I believe, that have good intentions want you to have a family. They want to fix it for you. Very difficult to set boundaries on that. But I began a journey of questioning why other people, to be good in their own life, need to feel good about my family dynamic. Once I was able to peel the layers back there and stop having these conversations where I felt almost in a place to gossip, to tell my side, I just thought, I don't need all that chatter. So I came up with things for you to say, for the reader to say, such as, I've asked and gone through every single question that you are questioning, and to the fact that you would think that I would make a decision without having already done all this work is offensive. Because no one wants to be without their family. Nobody. Yeah. So if I am at this place, I expect you to trust that I'm not a spoiled, rotten brat child and entitled or some whatever is so misunderstood. Bottom line, what I want the viewers to hear is that I am respecting the boundaries that my toxic family have set on me. They want to be toxic. My asking them to be different all the time is disrespectful of their desire to be toxic. I do not like it when people want me to be someone I'm not. And so there's a way to flip that no expert flips. Also, boundaries are written about in the literature basically to set on other healthy people who will accept your boundary. So in the healthy world, the psychologically healthy world, boundaries are used to somewhat control another person's behavior in your life. And this is how we definitionally understand this. It does not work that way with toxic people. Boundaries in toxic relationships are not about other control. It ends up being about self-control.
Yes.
If you set a boundary on a toxic person, you've actually just given them a tremendous amount of information on where and how and why you hurt. So they will come in and poke that boundary right as you set it. So what I'm teaching is that when you get to that line of your tolerance and you're watching it be crossed, silence is your superpower. They want your attention and your emotional reaction. They want your PowerPoint. They want you explaining to them exactly why they're that you see them, that you're exposing them, because now you're connected. So humility, quiet, and not wasting your voice. I'm not asking you to lose your voice. I'm saying the way you're going to lose your voice is to waste it on someone who's set to not hear you.
Yeah.
So it is about self-control. Boundaries are about self-control, raising your EQ, putting your own pride down. Because if you can trust that you know your own sense of what is right for you, you do not need these toxic people. Everything you don't say tells them everything they need to know. And then there's no way in. There's no way to bait you. Your silence cannot be misquoted.
Very well said. Very well said. Have you had any struggles with any sort of toxic dynamics in your own family that you created after, as a result of all of the stuff that has happened to you?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I learned to be very complicit to abuse. That was my toxic trait. Keeping the peace is for others, mostly. It does have an umbrella of protecting you, but you have to be the most inauthentic form of yourself to keep the peace. You are losing yourself as you do that. And I also think that there are times that that is a very necessary coping skill.
Yeah.
But I learned to be complicit to abuse. I learned to believe that those who abused me also loved me. And I think I carried that on into some friendship and dating choices, marriage choices. And I had to change those traits in me I hate the word codependency because I think it gets misunderstood. And I don't necessarily believe I was codependent, but I believe that I was familiar with abuse, and I attached that to the idea of love, and I had to redefine love. I had to redefine love, and I had to learn to be loved by nice people. And that was a transition for me. I wondered many things. Would I want to be sexual with someone who wasn't mean to me, and creating this incredible love-hate dynamic? Would I respect someone who was really nice to me? Would it feel good? So I had to really find me, and I had to learn to love me. And I also think this love yourself idea is very vague for people. It sounds good. So it would be great. There's no seemingly a formula out there to help us figure out how to do that. And we keep getting this love yourself. And it sort of became almost like offensive after a while. Like, really? Well, that's the most obtuse thing I've ever heard of in my life. Love myself. Hardy har, okay. So in the new book, I actually, at least for me, I did find a formula of how to do that. And I had to third person myself. I had to love myself as I naturally loved my daughter. So I had to make myself, inside myself, my own daughter. If I loved me like I was my own child, and I have all of this incredible skill set, step by step by step, how to do this, reparenting, remothering, refathering, because I am really good at loving my daughter, and it is so natural and fair and equanimous and disciplined, and there's healthy boundaries, and there's open communication, and there's allowed privacies for her to have. I don't dehumanize her in any way. And I will also say that I believe there's something super magical about my daughter that is so already unique to her own lifetime experience that I didn't create that, and it's just her. But I love myself now in the ways that I love London. And if you don't have children, how do you love your pets? How do you love your friends? How do you love, right? And love yourself in your own love language. Stop expecting everyone to change their lives and change to your love language. Boy, is that book misunderstood. It becomes bartering. Love yourself in your own love language, whatever that may be. And that made sense to me and it clicked. And I've had many, many people write to me, oh my God, I finally get it. Finally, someone figured out how to tell me how to love myself. I was walking around like, loving myself over here, I think. I don't know, I'm making a big difference on this. So,
Right.
yes.
Right. And then, then there was something that I learned the other day, or that was put in a nice way, that when you deprive yourself of your love language, of doing that for yourself, that is a form of self-destruction.
Absolutely. I learned self-neglect
Yep.
and to please others. Now, I do believe that that made me an empathetic person,
Mm-hmm.
but it also made me someone who had no clue how to set boundaries. I didn't know I had rights. I was living in maladaptive guilt, feeling guilty for things I did not do, but was told to carry. And working through all those cobwebs of figuring out, well, what's your stuff and what's my stuff? And so I didn't get a lot of verbal affirmation. I made the mistake of applying that concept of verbal affirmation, like, okay, well, it's the only way I know how to feel loved, and I'm dating a nonverbal man. So that book can tear people up as much as it can pull them together, because we keep are trying to change other people. So again, I continue in my own journey to recognize it's never about another person changing for us. So if I love verbal affirmation, then I'll do something and go, I'm super cute, and I compliment myself. Okay, so there are ways to do this where it's playful, like, first of all, I'm perfect, and I'm so not. So it's like just fun to play with positive words and positive compliments if verbal affirmation is my love language. Love yourself in your own love language, and love yourself as if you were your own child or your own pet or your own friend or whatever that way may be. Love yourself in those ways.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more about that. One question I did have for you, as you were talking about your family and kind of the dynamics that were happening internally, the question that I have, and one that I often talk with many of my clients about, is what about outside of your immediate family? Was there like extended family? Were there possibly even friends of the family,
Mhm.
or even your teachers or your peers' parents, or anyone that saw what was going on clearly, and maybe tried to offer support? People that weren't sort of schmoozed by the image, but actually saw right through it and tried to intervene.
Very few. There was a family that definitely got me encouraged into therapy. They were good friends with my mother, but they did see me as the problem. Then as life went on, I was very close to the father of this family, and he is the most sweet-souled person out there, but he does have a belief that all parents love their children.
Mm.
And my mom was executing a smear campaign on them, visiting their medical office multiple times a week for things she didn't need to be there for, but she was there trying to corral them on her side. And for a minute, that caused a separation between us. My thought was, if you
Mhm.
can't say we love her and we love you, so we aren't the people. Eventually he did, and he cut her off. I've lost every family member. My family isn't big, but that doesn't really matter. I've lost every family member. And there are a lot of people who believe me and read me and watch my videos and my Facebook all in private, but will not wish me a happy birthday on Facebook, for example. They don't want to be going against the abusers in any way
Mhm.
that's seen. So it is interesting. I have also had some people contribute very deeply to the smear campaign. One woman in particular apologized to me, but she had caused me a tremendous amount of pain. So
Mm,
what I said to her was, I appreciate the intent, and I hope that apologizing to me does something for you. I hope that apologizing to me helps you learn and you grow. And I hope it does something good for you.
mm,
Does not in any way heal the wounding that you caused to me.
mm,
And so it isn't going to do much for me because what's done is done. But I really do hope that it does something incredibly beneficial to you so you don't do this to someone else again. So I did appreciate that, the intent, but the apology did nothing for the wounds that she so deeply carved into gutting me in the smear campaign. And so I accept her for who she is. I don't feel any hatred or malice toward her or really anybody over on that side, just happy not to be in it, thrilled and happy not to be in it. And I really do hope that apologizing to me was a step in her own personal growth. And she was crying and she understood my answer very clear. And it was not mean, but it was, I do hope it does something for her. And she said it really has. She appreciated my even answering her call. I did have, I don't want to say necessarily who, but we'll say it was an in-law on my side of the, on that side, reach out to me after the death of my father, that I found out he died on Google. And I had about a 24-hour interaction with this person, recognizing that really the only intent was to grab the scapegoat and the woman who writes the book to get shoved in the middle of a divorce. So it took me a minute because I thought, oh my gosh, my daughter can have cousins and things like that. And I had to very quickly cut that off.
I want to ask you one last question, I think, or maybe one or two last questions if we have time. You mentioned that you know that there are some family members that sort of watch what you're doing, via Facebook or social media or whatever it is that you do, whether it be some publicity, form of publicity. I want to know what your thoughts on that are.
They are flying monkeys. I believe that they feed the source. I think it's so interesting that you will cut me off and follow my social media. And unfortunately on Facebook, like a big page like mine, unless they comment, I really can't remove. I can't block someone. I have 140,000 followers or something, and I can't search them. Like in Instagram, you can, but on Facebook, you cannot.
Yeah.
And so my thought is I'm just going to be me. And if they get brought up in interviews or other things and they know who they are, there's really an opportunity there for them to look in the mirror. I'll always provide that.
Mm,
I feel it's in their best interest to look in the mirror. I think it would be healing for them. I think there's some insight they could glean, responsibilities maybe they could take. But I know that they watch, and I kind of think it's so bizarre. I think it's so bizarre. I mean, it's almost funny to me because it's just so bizarre. It's like when I've removed myself from someone, I don't, not interested anymore. I don't hate them. Hate is such a strong feeling. And I really sort of just feel resolved. I don't feel nothing. They're my family. That's who I was born to. No one can replace them. I do miss having a family. I don't miss my family members as people or personalities, but I miss a mom and I miss a dad and I miss having a sibling. And there's times I feel all alone in the world. And I know that that's just par for my course, and that's okay. I can build resiliency there. But I just think it's so bizarre because I wouldn't invest my time spying on someone that I don't like. So I imagine they just must be coming from fear and maybe what lies they need to continue to generate to keep the smear campaign going. Or I think it's very bizarre.
It is. But I also wonder if there's a part of it that you wonder, like, or that I wonder about for you, that is it that they feel that they will never truly let go of you?
Yeah, when you think about the cluster B
Yeah.
dynamics, they hate you but love you, or they hate you and idealize you,
Yeah.
or maybe you're doing something they weren't brave enough to do and they're hanging out on that side. I think there's a lot of the cluster B dynamics going in on those people who can't let go. I feel healthy people let go. I also think it takes a far greater courage to let go than it does to hang on.
Yes.
When I was sitting at the door with my ear to the door, I wasn't hanging on to them. I was trying to figure out how to protect myself. I was trying to predict what they might do next because they were doing things I never would have expected. And it did really take me off balance and put me into fear and question my decision, which was the intent. I had a very strong therapist at the time. So I do think that there is some level of attachment they must have. To me, it is an attachment I don't quite understand,
Hmm.
because I just wouldn't want to be attached to anyone that I claim to so deeply hate. It's bizarre. I just don't get it.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, this has been an extremely eye-opening interview. I'm glad that you and I were able to coordinate.
Me too. Dr. Natalie, I so appreciate you having me on. And
Yeah.
my schedule is really wild, and I don't have like a team, and I'm a single mom, and I'm seeing 40 people every week and social media. And so, yes, we've had a few miscommunications.
Yeah.
I do appreciate the work you do in the world and the type of soul and heart that you bring to others. Whoever knows you, so lucky. And I really appreciate being on your show and helping the people that we can.
Likewise, and same to you. So I really appreciate you coming up here talking about that. I'm excited to check out the new book because the first book was very good. So if people love listening to you as much as I did and learned so much from you, can you tell us, Dr. Sherry, how they can find you and what you've got going on, if there's anything we can support you with?
Yes. So my podcast is on Apple. It's a subscription. It's $4.99. But you're going to get about $250 of therapy for 20 minutes. It's very high quality. I make sure. And that's called Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. And my website is drsherrycampbell.com. And then my Facebook and my Instagram, they're very, very, very active. You can see all my interviews. I do 3-minute videos, and it's all free. And my summits and stuff that I hold are on there. So that's Sherrie Campbell PhD. And then Instagram is Dr.Sherry.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you too. Much love.
All right. I forgot to mention in the beginning and doing the intro that Dr. Sherry and I got our wires crossed in terms of the timing for this interview. Nevertheless, I was so passionate about doing the interview that I was not going to let it pass without doing it. And so this interview actually took place in my car. So if you're watching this video on YouTube and you're wondering, why does this look a little different? It's because I'm not usually in my designated podcast space, such as where you see me here. But nevertheless, I had a lot of fun doing the interview, and I was so happy that technology now is so awesome that it allows me to accommodate and interview folks no matter where I am. So I hope that you guys take care of yourselves. And until next time, be well.